Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new video, and before we get started, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Let's try to get to 5,000 subscribers by April 10th, that would be much appreciated if we could. Again, also, if you didn't see my other video, thank you for 1,000,000 views. It really does mean a lot, so I'm assuming you guys didn't come here to hear me talk about how much I appreciate you guys, even though I do appreciate you guys. This is a political channel where we discuss political events, not a subscriber appreciation channel. So let's get started with our first person we have on this list. This is Eric Trump. I think he's Trump's son. It's that family kind of gets me confused sometimes, but I'm just gonna have his significantly below average. I was kind of leaning towards below average there for a bit, but I'm gonna put him as insignificantly below average. I think he's kind of the epitome of Trumpism without Trump. He doesn't have the white working class appeal that Trump has, and he just has that named him. So people who view Trump negatively are gonna really come out against him, and people who view him positively they'd come out for him, but they wouldn't come out for him in the way that Trump got rural numbers in 2020. So just to put it out there, I don't think Eric Trump is a good candidate. Now, Ron DeSantis, who have made videos about saying how praising his electability, I think that he could do really well in 2024. He's probably going to win his gubernatorial election in 2022 I think he's going to win by upwards of 5%. But I think he's, just to wrap it up, or to sum it up, I guess you could say, Ron DeSantis is Trumpism without Trump at its best. He has suburban appeal, but he's still going to get the Trump rural numbers, which is why he's so dangerous for the Democratic Party. They should do their best to make sure he does not get the nomination in 2024, because he would probably beat Kamala Harris. I think, him against Biden, that would be really close. I don't know who'd win. But DeSantis against Harris, I think, would result in a pretty convincing DeSantis victory. Charlie Baker, he's below average. I mean, he has suburban appeal, which is his best strength. He has appeal to moderate Democrats, and he has suburban appeal, but he's still not a very viable candidate for the GOP because he doesn't get the base turnout that other candidates like DeSantis would get. So if he could somehow get the base turnout, he'd be all good to go, and that he'd be probably up here and good or even great. But he just is not going to get that appeal because he's a liberal or Republican. So Don Jr., he'll also go there. He's kind of like Eric Trump, but he actually has some name recognition. I know Don Jr. much more than I know Eric Trump. So I'm just going to put him there. For the same reasons I put Eric Trump below average. They're not, neither of these candidates are great. Now, Dan Crenshaw is also going to go in, I guess, the okay tier. He's kind of in between okay and below average, but I'll put him in the okay tier. He's not as well, he's well known on the internet, of course, but he's not very well known by people, I guess, not on Twitter all the time and not in his congressional district. He represents a Texan, a central Texas. I think he's kind of near Houston, if I'm not mistaken. He's in a Houston congressional district, and he's kind of a neoconservative. I mean, he labels himself as a Trumpist, but his votes say otherwise. He's more of a neoconservative, so I think that he'd probably do all right with suburban voters compared to Trump, but he still wouldn't do great, especially if he campaigned as a Trumpian. And I think as a result, this is not a viable candidate for the GOP in 2024. But who's even worse? Christie. He obviously had that Bridgegate scandal, which makes him, he left office as the governor of New Jersey in January of 2018 as among the most unpopular governors in the history of the state. So for this reason, I guess you could say I don't consider him to be a strong candidate at all for the GOP. He has some Trump appeal for sure, but I don't believe that he would get anywhere close to the Trump rural numbers. Plus, he would do horrible with the white working class. He's known as part of the establishment, and his scandals would really bring him down. So, yeah. So the next person on our list is someone who's really interesting, Greg Abbott, who's the governor of Texas. Now, he has a lot of upside for the GOP, and I'm going to put him in good. He has suburban appeal. In 2018, in a really bad year for the GOP, he won his gubernatorial re-election by 18 against a decent candidate. I mean, Lupe Valdez was his opponent. She was, she had Hispanic appeal, which I think was why the Democrats ran her against Abbott, but he's a good candidate. I think that especially if his ending of that mask mandate, like a week ago, he ended the mask mandate. If that does age well, and if coronavirus cases continue to decline, that could be really good for him. People have already seemed to forget about the horrible storm that hit Texas, much of the South. He took a lot of heat for that. But since then he's been kind of smooth sailing. Most of the attention went to Ted Cruz because he went to Cancun for that. So Obviously, Ted Cruz got kind of Abbott was able to deflect a lot of that negative attention and instead went to Ted Cruz. But Abbott, if his taking away the mask mandate goes well for him, he could have significant Trump appeal because obviously the Trumpian base is kind of more anti-mask, and he could and he could hold on to his suburban numbers from 2018, which is why he could be a great candidate like DeSantis. So Abbott, I think, he has a lot of upside for the GOP. Now, Ivanka Trump, I'll put him for the same reason as Eric Trump. They're a bunch of the Trumps are being mentioned here because their last name, but I still really just do not think, being completely honest, I just do not think that she's a great. She doesn't have that way working class appeal. She doesn't have that rural appeal that her father has. Now, Josh Hawley's okay, I guess. I mean, I think before the insurrection 2 months ago, he would have been in the good tier, but he lost essentially all of his suburban appeal. He's a populist, so I think he could get the Trump numbers, but the insurrection is still really a stain on his reputation. So I think for that reason, he goes in okay instead of good. Ben Sass, he's below average. He doesn't have great suburban appeal. He'd do better in the suburbs than Trump did in 2020, maybe, but even that's kind of a gamble, and he would not get anywhere close to the rural numbers that Trump got in 2020 because he does not have the base appeal. He's a more moderate Republican. He has criticized Trump a lot. He's kind of betting his political future on being a more anti-Trump Republican. And also, you got to remember, people are going to say that Ben Sass overperformed Donald Trump in 2020 when he ran for Senate re-election. He was running against someone who had a really bad reputation. Chris Janicek, he had a sex scandal. So that kind of tarnished his reputation, and a lot of Democrats voted third party. There was a significant third party presence in that race, and a lot of Democrats either held their nose and voted for Sass or voted third party. Larry Hogan is the governor of Maryland. He'll go with Baker, I guess. Where's Baker? Yeah, right there. Below average for the same reasons, because he's a liberal Republican who can do good in the suburbs but not get the base turnout. Pence is going to go in the okay category. He's closer to good than below average, because I think that, a lot of diehard Trump fans don't like him, but he'd still get a good chunk of the Trump base, and he'd do well in the suburbs. So he could win, but I'm just going to put him in okay. I think for that reason that he's not necessarily a guarantee for these, I guess, for these electability. I guess the electability questions, I don't know why that took me so long to process. So now moving on, this is Mike Pompeo. Pompeo is decent name recognition. He was, I'm pretty sure he was the former CIA director under Trump, but he just wouldn't get the working class appeal that Trump had. So I think for that reason he's going to lose. Romney's same there. He's definitely the most prominent, I guess, anti-Trump conservative that is alive right now. I mean, he's up there with, I guess, John Boehner and others that I'm probably forgetting right now because I'm not thinking very well right now. But Romney, I do think, is a boomer bust candidate. I think he could do really well in the suburbs for his anti-Trump rhetoric, but he'd do horrible in the rural areas. He'd do probably worse than he did against Obama in 2012, and I'm not even kidding. He did poorly in 2012 against Obama in the rural parts of these states, and that was before he had his reputation as an anti-Trumper. And as we all know, Trump did very well in the rural parts of a lot of states. So he just is not viable for the GOP. If he ran as if he was running as the nominee of a center-right party, that would be great for him. But unfortunately, he's running for a very right-wing party, and that's not going to help him at all. Nikki Haley, I think I'll put her in below average because she has more Trumpian appeal than Romney, but still a suburban appeal. But either way, she's not going to get the base turnout that Trump had. So for that reason alone, she goes in the below average column. Rick Scott goes in the good column. He has Trumpian appeal. He actually did better than DeSantis in 2018. But overall, DeSantis did a lot better in the rural part of the state. So I think for that reason, DeSantis is a little better than Scott. But these Florida Republicans, Scott and Rubio especially, or not Rubio, Scott and DeSantis especially have great appeal nationwide, and I think they could be viable candidates for 2024, which is why Scott, I think, could run 2024, but I wouldn't bet on it. So Scott, I'll just put him in the good tier because I think he's up there with Abbott and that he could do well in the suburbs, but well in the rural parts of the state or parts of America. So for that reason, he'll go in the good tier. Paul Ryan just does not have. He was the former Speaker of the House. I just don't think he has any working class appeal. For that reason, he'll go in the significantly below average. He could do well in the suburbs, but he has no working class appeal like Trump does. And as you can see, DeSantis and maybe Abbott and Scott are the only candidates that actually have white working class and suburban appeal. And the rest of these candidates are kind of just mediocre with them, or good at one, bad at the other. Now, I think Rand Paul's good. I think Paul has more suburban appeal than, maybe a little more than Trump, but he's still not great in the suburbs. But I think he could actually put him in the okay column. But I think that he could get a big chunk of those those libertarians who voted for Joe Jorgensen or voted for Biden in 2020 because of their character questions, but Trump, because Paul's a libertarian, but he also is known for, I guess he doesn't really have scandals, and he was kind of popular with the libertarian community because of his father, Ron Paul, who was also very popular with them. So I think that he could do all right. He's kind of a boomer bust candidate, but I don't think he's going to run. I don't even know why Sean Hannity's on this list. He's a Fox News personality. He's a guy on Fox News. Don't really know why he's here. Tucker Carlson's also here. We'll get to him in a second. Rubio is okay. He's from a swing state, which makes him viable, but he just doesn't have that Trumpian appeal the way like other Florida candidates like Scott and DeSantis do. Although it would be interesting to see a Rubio Scott DeSantis primary, and for the heck of it, we'll throw in Matt Gaetz as well because these are prominent Florida Republicans. But yeah, Ted Cruz, he's below average at this point. I mean, he doesn't have great appeal to any group before the insurrection, and now he's just really not favorable. Plus, he flew to Cancun while Texas was freezing, so there are a lot of people who are mad at him for that, and I think he'd do very poorly as a result of it. Tom Cotton just is your average GOP candidate. He'd be kind of like a Romney in 2012, and that Romney was more established, and he's very average. So I think Cotton could do all right, but being realistic, he wouldn't really win. He doesn't have a ton of upside. Tucker Carlson, I think Carlson's in the okay column. He has Trumpian appeal, but really outside of that, he doesn't have much. He has working class appeal for sure, but he doesn't have appeal to the suburban voters who cost Trump the election in 2020. Kasich is going to go in the same tier as Romney. He has he's from Ohio, so he could do well enough in Ohio, but he's just not really. He doesn't have the Trumpian appeal because he spoke at the Democratic convention. So for that reason alone, he'll go in the same category for the same reason as Romney. Kristi Noem. This is kind of a hot take. I know a lot of Trumpians are praising her for her, her anti-mask stances and her refusal to have a mask mandate in South Dakota, but she's not really well known outside of the internet and on Twitter. So she'd do significantly worse than other candidates like DeSantis with the white working class. So yeah, I think that she could really do well with Trump Republicans who know who she is, but outside of that, I don't think you're doing too well. Tim Scott in South Carolina, same thing. He's just he's gotten attention because he's the only black Republican in Congress, I believe. Yeah, he is. But outside of that, he's kind of known as a neoconservative. He's more liberal on social issues. So I think he wouldn't exactly be their best candidate. He could be interesting to see, but he's just he wouldn't get the rural numbers that Trump got. He wouldn't be able to round up with white voters the way that Trump did. So last, we have the man we've been talking about this whole video, Donald Trump. Where would he go? I think he'd go in the good tier. This is higher than people think. I mean, he lost in 2020. He, in the eyes of the majority of Americans, incited the insurrection. Now, here's the thing: Americans have a very short memory, and I bet that by 2024, if he did run, he could still get close to the numbers he got in 2020. I think he'd still lose, but he's still a better candidate than a lot of these. So, again, guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see me do this for the Democratic candidates in terms of electability too, I can do that. But if you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe if you have not already, and I'll see you all in the next video.